Well, I would kind of like to, I think, put it on this side.
Looks like I glued it on there.
Oh, is it? Well,
Yeah,
okay,
no,
then,
I got it.
okay. That's why I let
Thank
you
you.
do it, because every time I do that, I pull the whole thing apart. That is the best bottled water.
Is this Fiji?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the best. But it's expensive. I never buy it.
Four Seasons LA always has that water in the room, and it's
Really
it's
nice.
the best of the bottled waters that I.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, thanks so much. Okay. This is Mike, by the way.
Oh,
Don.
Hi, Mike. How are ya?
I'm doing fine.
Is that a top hat on your ring? Is that what that is? Or a cowboy hat? What is that? Is that a hat?
No, you mean the ring
The
itself?
ring
No,
itself.
it's just
No, it's just a
di-
big fat.
It's just the way the stone is cut.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I noticed it when I came in. It kind of looks like a hat from above, you know?
Yeah, I can see
so
what.
beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
It's hard not to see it.
I'm rolling.
There's
Is that-
music playing,
Yeah, is
isn't
that
there?
music going to be a problem?
Just a little bit. Not
I would think so.
barely here.
Wonder where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think it must be from in the TV cabinet somewhere.
As a director, you notice those kinds.
Oh, it's amazing. Sound can kill you.
Yeah, especially when you start editing.
And
And
then
you
it
get those
pops.
jump cuts in the sound.
Oh, I think you did it.
And now the air conditioning fan is not going to be a problem, Mike?
Let's just turn that off.
Hear that? Or are you hearing it?
You're hearing it? Shall we turn it off anyway? You don't hear it at all?
Not hearing it.
Okay.
Okay.
And once again, we're rolling. Don, welcome to Dallas.
Thank you.
Appreciate your coming.
It's great to be here.
Really appreciate your coming and taking the time to talk with us about happy endings. Are you a believer in happy endings always?
I am. I like a movie to have a happy ending. I like it to be an earned happy ending. I don't like just something great happening to the characters at the very end of a film just to make us feel good. But I like a movie where the characters suffer and then there's some happiness.
You have an amazing cast. I mean, all named people practically. And I know you were on a small budget. What was the budget?
It was $5 million, a little under 5.
And you had 30 days for shooting.
30 days to shoot a very complicated story, or 4 or 5 stories really, all together.
Well, that's the thing. You have this big cast, and then each has a story, and the stories all kind of get intertwined. And when you were writing it, how did you keep all of that straight?
Well, I broke it down. I did one story on one page and then the second story on a second page and kind of ran the story through all of its beats, you know, and then kind of blended them together. So it was a little complicated, but not as hard. When you're sitting there with the actual tools and it's all down on paper and you can move things around, it's easy. When you see it as a film, when there's actors there and you're invested emotionally, it gets very complex.
Of all the characters, is there any one that you personally identify with?
Well, I identify with all of them. I mean, particularly the Lisa character, the one that Lisa Kudrow plays, is a woman who has a secret and spends her entire life trying to avoid facing it. I identified with that character.
In what way?
Well, I think we all have things that we've done or what we are, really, that we try to prevent people from seeing. In fact, a writing teacher said to me once, dialogue is never written to tell people how we feel, but to hide how we feel from other people. And that's helped me a lot in writing dialogue. I always am aware of what is this character trying to prevent the other character from finding out about him or her.
Now, you have Maggie Gyllenhaal singing yet. Had she ever sung in a film before?
I don't think she did. And I never really auditioned her. I met her for lunch, and I said, please do the movie, because two other actresses had fallen out. Gwyneth Paltrow was unable to do it, and then Jennifer Garner was unable to do it. So I said, please rescue me and do this film. And she said yes. And I said, do you sing? She goes, oh yeah, I sing. So I said yes. I wasn't in a position to kind of test her. I just said, yes, please do it. And she did. She came in about 3 days before we started shooting and spent a day and a half in the studio and just sang 4 or 5 songs. We anticipated using just 2 of them, but she sounded so good that we used 2 more for montages, underneath some montages in the film.
Jesse Bradford is really emerging, isn't he,
Yeah.
as a young actor of note?
Yeah, he was a very important piece of casting because his character is maybe the one that is the most most difficult for the audience to like immediately, because he plays a blackmailer. So I needed Jesse's charm and his good looks and his light touch to make that character palatable, and he did a great job.
Don, when you're working with a cast of, of named people, and you have about 10 really fine actors, and they each have a story, and then you get into the edit room, and always, a director is faced with having to get things cut down. You trim. How frustrating is that? I mean, you can't trim one way back and let the other one run away with it. How do you handle that?
It is hard. When I first saw this movie put together, it was 2 hours and 50 minutes. A long movie when I first saw it put together. It's 2 hours now. So we had to lose 50 minutes of material, and that is hard. But as you are editing and as you're enhancing the good moments, naturally the moments that are less important to the story, they then naturally fall away. And so it isn't really very difficult, but it is a process. You take 10 minutes out, then you look at it again, and you say, oh, maybe the job the actor has done in this scene will make it possible for me to drop out that scene. And actors do so much more for you than the script itself does. If Lisa gives a look, sometimes that's worth a whole scene that you've written to show how she feels, but she can just do that with her face. So that the actors help you cut, finally.
You wrote it with Lisa in mind, didn't you?
Well, Lisa's a friend of mine, and she did such a great job in The Opposite of Sex, and I've loved everything she's done. So, and she's a friend, so.
Okay. You wrote this with Lisa Kudrow in mind, and I didn't phrase it this way, but I will now. You wrote this with Lisa Kudrow in mind. What would you have done if she couldn't have done it?
Well, that would have been hard. It's a good part, so we would have found somebody to do it, I think, but nobody like Lisa. She's great, and it's great to have friends who you admire. It's harder to have friends whose work you're not crazy about. But with Lisa, I admire her so much. She's so great. She's a wonderful actress, a great human being. So it meant a lot to me when she said yes.
What about Jason Ritter? How did he come into this?
Our casting director called him in. I had never seen him before. I'd never known about him. Didn't know John Ritter had a son. Didn't know that son was an actor. So he walked in, and he was great. And we stopped looking after Jason gave his reading. I said, that's it. That's the guy. And that was a year before we actually filmed, because our money fell apart. We weren't at Lionsgate. We were somewhere else. So I had to call all the actors and say, I'm sorry, we're not doing the movie. And then when we got set up at Lionsgate, I called everybody back. And fortunately, and it never happens, fortunately they were all free, and they hadn't gotten a job for that month that we were going to shoot. So I grabbed him. He's great. He's also a delightful, funny, smart, warm person.
What is it they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree?
That's right. I think he must be very much like his dad was. I never met his father, but from what I hear, they were very, very similar.
Don, who was the biggest surprise to you of all the actors?
Well, Maggie I had never worked with before. And as I said, she had no preparation. She signed on about 2 weeks before we started shooting. We had no rehearsal. And I think she was a huge surprise to me, just in that she was so intelligent and so collaborative and had many great ideas, understood her character far better than I did. And that was a big surprise. And Steve Coogan, who's a British actor, who I had not known before, the studio said, you ought to look at Steve Coogan. So I looked at some films that he had been in and loved him, met him for lunch. We had a great 2-hour lunch where we talked about everything except the movie. And so he was another gamble for me. I didn't know his work before, and he was a wonderful, wonderful surprise.
Don, if you'd had, you say you had under $5 million, let's say, if you'd had $40 million, what would be different about the movie?
I don't think anything would be different. I think only in ways that would hurt us. First of all, if you have $40 million for a movie, the studio watches you very carefully because you're gambling with a lot of their money. With $5 million, they were happy to have a movie at the end of it. They didn't really care. They were happy to have anything that they could show to an audience because they've spent very little on the film. So $40 million buys you a lot of scrutiny. It buys you too much time. We benefited from our 30-day schedule. The actors were always working during the day. We couldn't afford to be precious. We couldn't afford to waste time on things that the audience doesn't really care about. The audience only cares about the story and the acting. They really don't care about other things that we spend an enormous amount of time, the shadow on a wall or that kind of thing. We probably would have built sets, which would have made it less real. We didn't have time to build, so we had to do everything on location. So more money, I think, would have hurt us.
Well, all I can say is, just leave it the way it is.
Well, thank you.
For me, it did have a happy ending. Delightful,
Thank you.
delightful film. And just fabulous cast and very well written and directed. So I hope that it has happy endings for you at the box office as well.
I hope so, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Okay.
You wrote this for Lisa Kudrow. How did she come into... No, let's try. You wrote this for Lisa Kudrow. Why Lisa?
Well, she's a friend, first of all, and she's also amazingly talented.
Okay. How did Jason Ritter come into the film?
Our casting director found him. He just showed up one day at auditions. I'd never seen him before.
Okay. Here's Maggie Gyllenhaal singing. Did you know she could sing?
Not really. I asked her, and she said yes, but I didn't audition her or anything like that. She just showed up and did it.
You say your film cost a little under $5 million. If you'd had $40 million, Don, how would the film be different?
I think it would have been worse. I think we would have had too much money to waste. We would have wasted time, and we would have...
When you're writing a story like this that's so complicated with so many characters and so many storylines, how do you keep it all separate?
Well, paper and pencil. When you start writing, you put one story down one piece of paper and the second story on another.
Which of the characters do you personally identify with?
Lisa's character, I think, speaks to me the most. It's a character who has a secret that she's afraid other people will find out.
Why?
Well, she has a secret that something happened to her, or it's something about who she is, and she wants to cover that up from everybody around her.
Okay, that's fine. That'll do it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, don't you want to be on camera saying it's a wonderful